roll call.
Yes. First, before I do the roll call, I'd like to welcome Mr. Walter Slate. He's our new member to the committee. And after the roll call, if you'd like to just introduce yourself to the rest of the committee.
So Chair Wally, everybody does. Wally Slate, in my career, I was a lawyer, worked for a large corporation, AirTouch, which was a cell phone company here. And I majored in economics in college, and I find finance and economics to be very interesting. Hopefully, I'll be quiet today, but
Great.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Welcome. We meet every year here every other Tuesday, so every Tuesday of every other month, but we'll discuss that further in the meeting. So with roll call, Chair Polito.
Here.
Vice Chair Leeds, excused, absence. Committee Member Walker.
Here.
Committee Member Patil.
Yeah, here. I'd have to leave at 3 o'clock today.
Okay. We should be.
Maybe done by then.
Yeah.
Hopefully by 2:30.
Member Steve. And Mayor Whitmer.
Here.
And Vice Mayor DeGoya, excused vacation.
I don't think there's any public comment, but I'll ask. There's nobody here. Moving on to the draft minutes from way back in March. My vague memory tells me that these minutes are pretty accurate, but does anybody have any comments to the contrary?
I just had one question, and I know I read these before our last attempted meeting, where we didn't have a quorum, but when I just read it again, there's a paragraph a sentence on the second page of the minutes in the second full paragraph, and it says, the town will look more on interest rates with investments now. I didn't know what that meant. Is there a typo?
Probably. We'll look more towards.
Toward it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to figure out how to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
how do you make sense of it?
Right?
You're gonna look at interest rates more and
Well, we'll just verify, interest rates have been increasing, so because of that, we're looking at, under our diversification, seeing if we can take, more of our investments out longer. Some are maturing currently, and so when we do that, we're just looking at how the interest rates are, taking advantage of that, but also understanding our liquidity needs with, our capital projects.
And yes, as you see it with the higher interest rates.
And so,
No other comments?
Okay, that's the only thing.
Scheduled past month, so. That's the only comment. I look for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next item, number 4, is to replace me.
No.
No.
I don't even know, am I,
No.
It's a lifetime appointment. I'm at the end, in December or next June, do I have a 4-year?
Goes through June.
We gave you 2 years.
It's June, I believe it's through 21.
Okay.
For you.
Really?
And they extended your terms from 2 years to 4-year terms.
It's a 2 4-year term.
So you're stuck.
But yours, I think,
Anyway, would somebody else like to serve as chair or vice chair? And you'd be, by far, have the best attendance record.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily make me the right one. I nominate Bob Polito to continue as chair.
Right? And then I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to just iterate that, it's just customary that we do this. Does not mean we have to make changes to the chair, vice chair, it just gives the committee an opportunity.
It's good governance to want to see it going.
Well, I'm thinking though that given Mr. Lee's difficulties in making meetings this past year, that I might consider a different vice chair. And I would nominate Ann Walker.
I second that.
Oh. As long as it doesn't mean I have to be chair eventually. I gotta learn a lot more before I can spill Bob's shoes.
Any other discussion or comments, or
For nominations.
for nominations? Do we have to,
So we have a nomination, by Ms. Polito for, Walker, and then there was a second by.
don't tell Jeff I did it, don't put that in the minutes.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
We'll just,
We'll say who was nominated, who was elected, that's all you're saying.
All in favor of Ann serving as our vice chair?
I abstain.
All right, congratulations, Ann.
Thank you.
I hope-
Better train me well.
Okay, now the meat of the meeting, Catherine, well, Wally hasn't met you, but I think the rest of us have. Glad to have you here. And
Thank you.
I'm glad you found the building.
I know, me
Because we
too.
didn't want to move the meeting. So go, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I'm the engagement partner, Catherine Yuan, with Mason Associates, for the fiscal year 2019 audit. Does anyone need my business card? Please.
Wow.
Sure, I'll take one, sure. I know I got one last year, but I have no idea where I put it.
Hopefully,
If I put this one in my phone,
I'll
if I
give
put it
you
in
that.
my
I'm just
phone.
pleased your firm is Maze, not Mazers.
Mazars.
Mazars,
With
Ms. Trumps.
Oh, really? Oh, dear.
Okay, all right. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I've been with Mason Associates for 23 years. My specialty is municipal auditing throughout it was my first job out of college, so I guess that's the only thing I know how to do. Thank you for having me back. This is a required communication that set by the audit standards. The history behind it is before the Enron disaster, that there was no direct communication between the elected officials that hire us versus and the auditors. So our relationship with management were really close. So there may be information that the elected officials, the governing board knows that we do not know. So that's why now, after the Enron thing, that it is required that we directly communicate with you twice a year. The first time in this meeting to take in input for the planning of our audit. And then at the end of the year, I will come back to present to you the result of the audit. Okay, so none of these questions that I asked here is a result of what I found in the audit. They are standard questions, so please keep that in mind. Now, how deep do you want me to go into this? Because I believe all you can read this document. Do you want me to go? How much detail do you want me to go into this?
Well, you have one new member, so maybe
Okay.
a little bit of detail.
Sure. Okay. So a few things that we are required to communicate with you. First of all, it is the standards we follow for all auditors in this country is the general accepted auditing standards. With the town, we have been requested in our during the proposal process to also follow the government auditing standards. So there are a few more steps that we actually would do and verify. So most entities receive grants that are required to have a grant audit will follow the government audit standards. But the town believes that that's what they want to follow. So we perform those extra steps every year, regardless if there's a grant audit. So what we do as an auditor is that the main goal is at the end of the year when management prepared the financial statements, then we come in and we review the financial statements and perform certain testing, and then go, well, I believe the numbers reported on the financial statements are materially correct. So keeping that in mind, that we do not look at every single transaction, but through our testing, through our confirmation process, we just feel like those numbers are good. In a big picture, they can be relied upon. Now that is different than the financial health of the organization. So sometimes people kind of get confused about it, just because somebody got a clean opinion doesn't mean that they are financially sound. So that's a different, that is for you to evaluate. Of course, if it is in a really bad situation, if we have a going concern, we will always, alert the reader of such. Okay? Questions? Okay, so second page, the audit scope. So what do? We do a bunch of stuff. Basically, we, during the interim process, during the interim, the first phase of the audit, we come into your town and we conduct interviews with management. Through that, we obtain an understanding of the internal control environment. What that means is that how we obtain an understanding of the procedures that is done in the town to allow the town to operate and report and stay in compliance in an effective manner. So with that, we document it, and then for every key control, we verify it through, just say, hey, can you show me you really reviewed the bank reconciliation? So that's what we usually do, and this year that happens in April. Then in October, we will come back, and at that phase of the audit, we basically are just testing balances. So there are a few ways of doing it. Sometimes for like cash and investment or debt, for example, we will send out confirmations to the bank, your bond trustees, and then compare those amounts with the records of the town. Some other areas we test transactions to make sure that the system can be relied upon. For the county and the state, the revenues that they gave to you, we also verify that through confirmations. And then a big part of the audit that has become bigger and bigger is the information system, because nowadays a lot of the information is processed through that. So we have a certified information system auditor in our firm that he is in charge of doing all that information system review. Okay.
So, if I could ask a question, so y'all have been coming here for quite a number of years. I've been on the council now 9 years, and I think before that I was on the finance committee, and at that time we were working with maids. So I ask this question all the time, and I always get a different answer. So the numbers and running the numbers that you put in something here, and did somebody, do you look at the procedures? I've been told yes, and I've been told no. So I think that there's two things to doing an audit. And one is are we following the procedures that we have? And if we say we're gonna put something in and somebody has to sign it, do they do that? Okay, well, that's fine. But then looking at the procedures and making sure that they're sound, so that they don't have loopholes in there that could invite fraud or miscommunication. As part of this audit, personally, I think that should be something that is included in audits. I don't know if you do that, and I don't know if you intend to do it this time. In the past, when I've asked this question, when I first got on the finance committee meeting, they said, we don't look at those. And in fact, that's how I found out that in some cases, we didn't have any procedures for stuff.
So I think you're really talking about the internal control environment, isn't it?
Yeah, and so she mentioned internal controls, and are we following our procedures? But the question is, do you read the procedures and actually say, these don't sound right? Like there have been in the past, there have been discussions on handling cash out of the park, okay? So not since we've changed over, but in the past, we used to have an employee over here, and that employee sometimes managed stuff with cash and sometimes took checks or credit cards, and so there was always the cash traceability that one of our other residents, Jim Massey, would bring up regularly about managing cash over here at the park, and then we finally rewrote the procedure that says we will not take cash, we will only take it at the town center. So I mean, so I I guess I'm not really sure what you do now and what you don't do now.
Sure.
Do you look at the procedures? Do you not look at the procedures? Do you only look to make sure we're following the procedures, or what specifically is it?
So I think what I'm hearing is that sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no, because it depends on what procedures those are. Investment policy, we look at it every year. We make sure that you're in compliance because that's a high risk area. We compare that to the state code. We compare portfolio to the policy. So that's that piece we always look at. Disbursements, in general, when we test the disbursement, then we follow it through with, based on those transactions, then we test the procedures through. I think the concern with cash procedures is that there's so many cash collection sites, we don't look at them, all of them, every year. So some years we test the transactions to make sure the system is okay. Other years we select different cash collection sites and we look at it. And if you have, that's why it's not, we have to kind of evaluate what will cause some material statements to the financial statements, and going from that perspective, we plan our audit. But if you have a concern in an area, and that's why we're having this meeting, then you let me know, and then we will do those procedures too.
Well, some of them, I don't mean to belabor the point, but
Yeah.
in other organizations that I've seen that, okay? And they're generally small organizations similar to the town. I'll just use like procurement, okay? An engineer specifies what he wants, he gets quote unquote from quotes. He places the order, he has the right to place the order. He then notifies the finance guy that he's received the asset that he bought, and tells finance to pay for it. Well, that invites fraud. How do you know that he really did specify it? How do you know he ran a competitive procurement? How do you know that he actually received anything? Because he could have said, well, it was a consumable and it's gone now. And did no one ever check to make sure that we actually got something? I mean, so those are things that, I mean, it's not an example of here, but it's an example that I've seen in some other organizations that are similarly small, that the audit didn't catch.
So you're talking about procedures. Okay, procedures,
Yeah.
we look at cash, investment, disbursement, cash receipts, transfer budget. I may be missing something, capital assets.
You look at the purchasing policy.
We talk that we every year we do,
Okay.
like procedures wise.
So you're reading the procedures.
We don't necessarily read the procedures, we try to understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And based on that, and then we test it. So if Robert say that this is, person A has to authorize the transaction, it goes into finance, and person B has to look at it, then we go show us some evidence. Is that, so those are,
Yeah, can I, go
But
ahead.
they do on the AP purchase policy, they verify that, they see that every year. Has anything changed? Has your policy changed? They make sure that any policy, if they've changed, they want to see that council took action. They verify, they reread it. Like, our investment policy hasn't changed until this past May.
Right,
So
just
now
amended
they're
it.
aware of
Yeah.
that, and so they're gonna review that come in the fall, that our policy changed, and then make sure that our investments follow that guideline. With a purchasing policy, the last time it changed was in 2015, and they verified that, they asked us, that's your purchasing
But
policy.
when they verify it, they look at it from what could go wrong with it standpoint, and then make a recommendation, as well as make sure that people are
Yeah.
following.
exactly.
Okay,
But-
fine, that's
but
good, that's fine.
Procedure wise, we look at it every year.
Okay.
Because a lot of entities do not follow that policy.
No, I understand that, and the only reason I asked too was because your organization, I won't say has a monopoly, but it seems that every organization that I'm on, and that I end up getting myself on the finance committee for some reason, you're always the auditor, not you personally, okay?
They're that good.
And there's a different threshold that I get from talking to some of your associates, your colleagues, about what they will look at and what they don't do. And many of them have told me no, we don't look at the procedures. We run our tests and we look at what you've got, we look at your historical record, but we don't check to make sure that the procedure, for example, will not invite or allow for fraud to happen.
That's the internal controls.
Right.
Yeah, so let me see if I understand this. My background is in being a lawyer for public for-profit corporations, and there are two different kinds of audits I'm familiar with. One is the typical auditing the financial statements, which you do for the town. The second audit, and I think it's under 404 A or B, I forget which, but anyway, it's a separate audit which large public companies are required to have done, where the auditors actually audit the internal controls, not the financials, the internal controls, and you don't give us that, is that right? It would be way too expensive to get that.
There's not a.
There's no requirements.
Yeah, there's not an opinion letter for that, but because because you require that gas audit, the government,
They do that.
auditing standard, we have an opinion about your internal controls over the financial reporting, but it's not as detailed as
Right.
what you get in that. You know,
Because I understand, I get
survey
that,
office,
yeah,
stuff
okay,
like that.
yeah.
Mhm.
Good question.
Yeah, Sarbanes-Oxley is a result of Enron, WorldCom, and all that, and that's where it created all of that.
3-4 years ago, there was actually a comment, not a major thing, but a comment on the audit that we needed to adjust our internal controls for something within the finance department. It was involving Teresa,
It was the users,
the users, yes.
because we're so small, that, the person that commits the journal entry can't be the person that enters
Right.
the journal entry. So to mitigate that, there's a report that we run that I verified, that we keep track of, and I signs off on it, that, I sign off on all the JEs that are posted. I can commit them, I can enter them. And then this other report that we run kind of validates the internal control, because there's some job specifics that people still have the capability to post journal entries. There's 2 people on my staff that can do that. I'm the only one that can commit them. So that additional report is what we run to mitigate that issue.
And my recollection is we do get a management letter, which gets to what George was saying. So if you do, even though you're not giving us a audit of the internal controls, you could manage a letter and say, we found no significant deficiencies, or whatever the right words
Yes,
are.
please
And
do
then
that
you
to
sometimes
alert
make
you.
suggestions, which don't rise to the level of there's a problem, but they're just something for us to think about, right?
Yes, so in summary, we look at your procedures in the key area that I just kind of told you every year. And we verify in each key area for those procedures, we verify the key control. We allow in our audit, at least every 3 years, we do an in-depth audit in a particular section, cash receipts, cash disbursement. We take a bunch of samples and make sure that it follows the policy. But every time when there's a policy change, we will also do that. So if I went and tested it last year, and you change your policy, then we have to retest it, and then we have to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, got it, thank you very
Okay,
much.
you're welcome. Oh, okay, so.
Now we're on the next page.
Yes, so, just a reminder, we also, issue a letter for your Measure A, funds. So that's part of the audit also that we will conduct. We already talked about timing, so I'm on number 3. Keep in mind that, there are certain things that management will, we rely on the information they provide. So an example will be, for litigation, we send out a letter to the attorney, but if there's any other concerns or any other, pending litigation that we don't know, that we do ask management to, disclose it to us. So that is some certain reliance that we have on management.
So quick question about that. I believe sometime in the last few months, it was mentioned that we typically have some number of workers' comp claims going on. Are any of those in litigation, and are you getting letters from those attorneys, or are they in arbitration? What's going on there?
So I think workers' comp we have claims in the claim section that we actually have So what happens is we already have, confirmations for general liability claims and workers' comp claims from, we send a letter to the insurance, carrier. Sometimes, some of our entities may have litigation that is not covered under those, carriers. So that is what we need to rely on the attorney. So, and then also when we get the letter from the attorney, we'll make sure every single claim is either on the loss run, or we need an estimate. Okay.
I have one question
Yes.
before we go any further, and it goes back to time. I still don't understand when the fiscal year ends June 30th, and you don't even start doing your work till October. Are you making changes going backwards
Well, we,
in August and September?
well, in August, we have up until August, the end of August, is we kind of 2 months, sometimes it'd be in September, we'll receive revenue, from the county, sometimes that late. So we accrue it, we're under modified accrual accounting, so we make sure that it gets captured in the fiscal year that it does. So.
So you accrue some number that you think is gonna be what it is?
No, that we know that what it's gonna be. We'll receive the money, but we'll receive it in April, or in August, but it's for fiscal year of 18-19. So we accrue that revenue into the year that it is for.
But everything's on accrual accounting. So we don't have to wait till you actually get the cash to close the year.
Well, we just need to verify that we received it, the monies, and then that's just the revenue side about it. The other side is the expenditure component, getting information, getting invoices from our vendors, for stuff from the 18-19 fiscal year. So it's doing that. But most agencies, it's at least 2 months after the year end closing that they close their books, getting the information. But the reason why our final audit is in October is just that's when we're scheduled for that audit. So we could be done, we aim to be done by September, mid-September. So when they come in October, the year's pretty much ready, we get everything ready for audit. The requirements that they ask for, they have a checklist that we prepare all that, so as they come and do the verification of testing.
But then like at the end of the fiscal year, towards the end, like May or June, that's when we let contracts, we have money left over for tree trimming and stuff like that. And
I wouldn't call it money left over, it's.
They get issued.
May and June is when they're issued, because it's the summertime, school's
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
that's when all
I'm just,
the projects
in the
occur.
private sector, 75 days from the end of your fiscal year, you're closed.
Right.
Or you've got a problem.
No, it doesn't mean that we're closed, we don't close until October, it just means that's when we're ready to have our audit. But it's usually 2 months after the fiscal year and close, and we're still
Go ahead,
looking.
Kathy.
And the 75 days, Bob, at least last time I paid attention, which was probably more than 5 years ago, even the largest public companies get that. I guess they get 60, and then the next size gets 75. So, and the smallest public companies get 90. So even public for-profit companies can have up to 90 days before they're required to file their audited fiscal year end numbers. So this isn't that far off from that, really.
No, it isn't, and then,
It ends up being.
Well,
a whole lot more than
no, I
90 days,
understand,
'cause she
Bob, I
doesn't show up
understand.
till October.
and then with the state though, the state
Don't
agencies
even
have
bring
until
that up.
January 31st to file their fiscal year and audit, so that's 6 months.
let's take
with
out
that.
the state.
And when is the checklist given for everything that you need to keep ready for October? When you-
They send it to us by the end of August, early September.
So it's all ready for that.
So the process is that first you have this accrual period. Sometimes, the modified accrual period, so sometimes it's 45 days for some agencies, sometimes it's 60 days. And then, so it depends on, how the agency wants to work this. Sometimes some agencies will just estimate, anything in August, they will estimate. But for smaller agencies, you may be more sensitive to your fund balance, and then, so you may want to wait for the actual to come in. So like, for example, water districts, they are all required to issue their audit, the financial statements by Labor Day, right? So then a lot of times they just kind of, do a lot of estimate. We usually do those audits in August because of that. So after that period, usually, because you have multiple departments, they may still be sending you finance invoices in, September, early September, and a lot of those has to be capitalized. So that's the one piece that when you have multiple departments, my understanding is that you have a small entity.
With capital projects,
Yeah.
yeah, that's in the capitalization component for construction in progress. So we need to put in there, we need to, create the asset for the project that's completed.
So then after Robert closes his books, and my understanding is that then he takes our checklist and create all these schedules. Our audit season, just to give you an idea, so it's, starts from August, goes all the way to January. So October is kind of like in the middle. We have organizations that will go earlier. It will take a cultural change. It will take a lot of effort from everybody, pressure from the top, because it's not just up to finance at the time, it's up to the other department when they submit the invoices, especially the capital assets piece. I have clients that close really early, that we come in and then we'll do all these entries, because of that capitalization piece is always the most difficult. So, I mean, like, if you guys want to go that route, like, I'm happy to have a conversation with you, hook you up with other agencies can do it, but it will take pressure from up top to get the entire town to commit to this. And then you also have to change the policies so that you have maybe a 30-day accrual instead of 60. Because once you have 60 days accrual, it makes it more difficult for staff.
So just a question, a hypothetical. So let's say the end of the fiscal year, we are due X dollars from such and such government agency or somebody, and so we book it because we're supposed to. And then 60 days later, or whatever the period is, they haven't paid up. Do we then put a bad debt on the fiscal year end financials? What do we do?
So if it is not a grant, then you would not recognize that receivable. You will only
So
recognize.
you just you back it out after the fact?
Yes.
You do an adjustment.
Okay.
If it is grant receivable, then under a accounting statement, then you will leave it on the books.
And it kind of alleviates too from having prior fiscal year adjustments. If you get into the habit of estimating and it doesn't happen, you already closed your books, and next year you're gonna have an adjustment. And then your fund balance changes because you didn't receive the revenues, or you didn't book an expenditure in time into that fiscal year.
Okay, so the last part is the fraud considerations. Keep in mind that there are two kinds of fraud. One is to take something from the town, steal, what we usually call like theft or stuff like that. The other type is to manipulate financial statements. Actually, that's very common. That maybe if not in the town, but in general. So
Cooking the books.
Just since we are recorded, okay, so just in general, those fraud usually have higher amounts, obviously, because you're not just going to manipulate your financial statements for $10,000 or something. Usually that will be when maybe the town has a lot of budgetary concern. Maybe you give a bonus to your staff if they meet the budgetary goals, or there's a debt compliance to meet, the ratio to meet. That's when those fraud becomes more common. So keep that in mind. Do you have any knowledge of any fraud or suspected fraud? Okay. And you have my card. If you need to talk privately, please feel free to. Are there areas that you believe are susceptible to fraud?
Well, there are the same areas that are susceptible to fraud anywhere.
Okay.
I have no reason to believe there is any fraud occurring. Yeah, that's at the state level, yeah.
Okay. Are you aware of any allegations of fraud or suspect? Did anybody report it to you or?
No.
Okay, so the last one, let me explain it before I ask, is related party transactions has to do with that. It's okay to have arm length transaction, so if you maybe if there's an elected official and then you have a spouse that, you know, has a company, and then, as long as the process is open, you go through the purchasing policy, we just have to disclose it, if there's, you know, it's the appearance of related party transaction, so that's what we're looking at. So it doesn't mean that you absolutely cannot do business with those people, but we just need to know if we evaluate it and then disclose it so that nobody has any misunderstanding. So with that in mind, are you aware of any related party transactions? No? Okay.
No, but those type of transactions would be against the fair political practice. And that person or persons would be either disqualified or recused from making a decision.
Okay. Okay, so is there anything else that you would like me to incorporate into my planning this year?
I have one issue, which the civic center spending relative to budget. Is the civic center advisory council tracking all the spending penny to penny against budget?
No, the Civic Center Advisory Committee was disbanded by the council, because it met the final thing. So the council gave, under the purchasing policy, for construction projects, I have the authority to grant or approve change orders up to, I think it was 15 or 20% of the project cost, which for this project is $7 million. I'm uncomfortable doing that. So we went to the council with a amended structure that reduces that to, I think it's 250,000 maximum amount of change orders. And once it exceeds that amount, once it exceeds a cumulative 2 million, then it comes back to the council for readjustment of that issue. But it's all done at the staff.
But everything that George does with regards to, even before, when he had his substantially lower signature authority, he sends a letter out to all council members, and we see who he authorized payment to that was underneath the limit, and then also that we can track that on the, one of the items in the staff report is the check register, which many of us go through fairly completely, so we do kind of track that.
George, is there a separate individual item approval as opposed to cumulative, the total?
Yeah, you mean?
I thought I heard you.
Yeah, standalone.
Standalone, and then.
Maximum amount of a single change order, and then a cumulative amount.
Cumulative.
And that's over 250.
Correct.
But I think Bob was saying that we had a list of estimates from MAC 5, and are we kind of triangulating those against what the?
Well, it's even more specific. I mean, we've adopted budgets in the past several years that include some money for the civic center and for the library. Robert was kind enough, after I poked at it a few times, to run me a general ledger for the last 2 years, 2 fiscal years, of all the expenditures in the various 406 buckets. And from that, I can make zero comparison to purchase orders or budgets. And it just seems to me that since this is a very high profile project, that there could be a lot of good or bad press and ramifications if it's not on budget.
So there is I don't know if I sent you the cost model manager, which is prepared by MAC 5, which is our project manager, that details out the project into its 7 or 8 different project categories, everything from pre-construction to FF&E and post-construction, and it line items out the estimated cost for each particular section, whether it's underground utilities, whether it's a construction component, whether it's HVAC systems and all that sort of stuff, in the estimate, that's line item down. And then MAC 5 compares the scheduled values from the contractor that the contractor provides with every payment request against that cost estimate that was originally provided in terms of the budget for that particular item. So if the contractor said that the HVAC systems are gonna be 1.5 million, and the original estimate for the project against what MAC 5 prepared was 1.2, then we have a conversation around that. But that's the project cost. And that also sets our overall budget expectation for the project.
I understand that, and I understand there are lots of incidental expenses, the biggest of which so far have probably been putting up these trailers and moving you. But we do have formal adopted budgets that said we expect to spend this many dollars this year on these projects, and we expect, there are less formal documents somewhere, various places, that say over a period of years, we're gonna spend this much money, which I don't know that those numbers jive with what you're talking about in this cost management.
Yeah, they come from the same place. The budget estimates that we put in the 1920 budget and projected forward into the 5-year CIP match the cost model manager numbers. What's different is the allocation year to year. Cost model manager doesn't do it year by year. We divided that up year by year. And one of the things that Robert and I are actually working with the contractor on for the city council is the cash flow analysis. Because we're talking about that COP and the need to borrow for cash flow over the next 3 years. So we need to be able to predict what the progress payments are gonna be for the contractor each month, so we can better gauge that need. And that will probably end up changing the year-to-year budget once we have more definition around what that cash flow is gonna be.
Do you get this report? How often do you get that?
It's at the end of every council meeting, we look at it. So every council meeting, towards the last item on that is generally the civic center, and we go through how much money we've gotten from after to now, and what the spending is, and what changes are. Every Friday, I get a letter from George that at the end shows what he spent money on, as well as goes into detail of what's gonna go on. So we had problems over here, as you pointed out. Yes, George has detailed out all of those and what the impact is and how long it's gonna take to resolve, and how much additional money would be spent. So for example, when the people that lived on Ashfield decided that they wanted, they thought it would be unsafe for them to be walking or riding their bikes coming to the park, since they were now cut off, they asked for a special decomposed granite route to get over here, and so that cost $16,800 or something like that. George made it clear to us what we were gonna go do, and then he went ahead and approved it. And there's been a couple other ones associated with the move over here. There's also been some buses where they've sent us, we've got some furniture for free, things like that, so. Now, we have not seen, Amoroso gave us a bid, and the bid is broken down into the individual components that MAC 5 has. I don't think that that's been, I haven't seen that.
So this discussion has reminded me of a question that I wanted to ask Catherine, and that is, given that there's been this whole upheaval and all of the administration had to move from the old town center over these temporary buildings, is there any additional things you need to take into consideration in the audit to make sure that like all the records and things from there made it here, or the computers didn't get, something didn't happen to them? I don't know the right questions. You understand my question.
So when we came in April, we were still at the old
Okay.
building, right? So this will probably, this is something we will look at next year.
Oh,
And yes, because unless you have concerns, then I think the main piece will be the IT piece. If you want us to do another scan, we can.
But yeah, as far as like everything that we, moved over, like we did move over all our files, everything came over, everything's in storage that we had over there at the town center. Obviously the buildings that were there are no longer there, so those will be recognized as no longer part of our asset. So that's part of what we'll see, in this audit. Equipment, same thing. I mean, most of our equipment's the P component, and that's vehicles. A lot of our vehicles and stuff, we still have. And, when we get rid of vehicles with trade-ins, we verify that, those vehicles are said vehicles, VIN numbers and everything, and we, dispose of them appropriately through council action.
I was more interested in anything that was sort of specifically derived from the need to move, which was a major, as you know, major undertaking.
No,
So it would be good, back to Bob's question though, if in fact, over time, that we could see kind of a reconciliation between Act 5 and Amoroso, once you guys get all that squared away, and then as George is authorizing changes, some of the changes may be the cost for doing something, actually we have a savings, or we had an overrun in a certain area because maybe there was a pass-through cost we didn't know about or something like that, you authorize that, or we shouldn't have those, or we've changed something.
Right. No,
Bob brings up a great idea, a great question, but I think to date, I believe that we're informed, and actually the 250 is a number lower than what staff had recommended, so we cut that back.
I was just kind of shocked when I looked at this, and I didn't go, like I said, I've got numbers from July 1 of 2016, so the start of that fiscal year. It adds up to almost $4.2 million, and we didn't break ground till a few months ago.
And that's correct. A lot of it was our design. You have Mac 5, the Governess was our architect, and if you follow the last couple of years, we've had a lot of changes, amendments to those contracts. I think up to 18, 19 amendments. So it's all design.
I understand that in all projects of this scope, that the actual expenditures rarely equate to the original budget. I'm just trying to, I would like to be able to quantify it, and sounds like you have a document that kind of does that.
Yes, actually, a series of several, which I can certainly share those, that's not a problem. In terms of architectural costs, those amendments are largely complete. They're on the construction phase of the project, so they're in their last phase for architectural. The only thing that comes up from here forward is if we make architectural design changes as change orders that require architectural modification. Those should be relatively minimal. So that cost will subside. And overall, I think it ended up being around $5 million in total for design fees for the total project of $50 million. So it's around 10% mark for architectural costs.
But we thought we got nickel and dime done.
Oh, yeah.
On the architectural
For sure.
design. In fact, we complained a lot about that. Even WRNS's biggest supporters on the council started complaining towards the end. Because every time we talk to them about something, or can you give us this, or can you look at that, they had their hand out.
Yeah.
Big time.
Part of that was process, and part of it was for a lot of things. So that's been curbed now that we're in the final phase.
Contractors tend to
Contractors
be more noted for that than architects, so we're off to a bad start, I guess.
So we're up to a fairly decent start with the contract.
Yeah, I know, I heard him say we were on time and on budget.
Yeah.
That was the day we broke ground.
That's
Yeah, you actually have to sign contract then.
So we track change orders by two, I track them anyway, by two factors. One, contractor requested, meaning it's either a problem with the plan set or something the contractor wants to do, suggests. That could be either in benefit to us or not benefit to us. And then owner requested changes, things that we said, oh, look, we need to make this adjustment like that path or something else for the project.
It was pretty generous of you to put that I'll blame it on you.
How many people are gonna be using it for $16,000?
Hopefully, well.
I had some of the same comments, I can tell you. However,
Any more questions or anything?
but I have ridden my bike on that path, and I think it's.
I'm going to now to get my
Well, you
money's
know,
worth.
I live in Lindenwood and I have to cross Middlefield to get to the park. I think you should put an overhead walk. So I can safely get
Where do you
there.
live in Lindenwood? Because there's gonna be a crossing path with one of those lights that you.
Oh,
push.
really?
Yeah, coming out of Linden Avenue, going to Glenwood, yeah, that's gonna happen sometime with the redesign. with
Well, that's all we need is more problems at that intersection.
Well, it has so many accidents there.
I know.
So, and there's no crosswalk there, so that's part of this, when BG&E finishes
Right,
the work on it. All right, anyway, that's off topic.
Sorry,
I'm not allowed to
sorry.
talk about
my
it.
fault.
One last thing on the Civic Center project. Robert and Ted are working on OpenGov, that transparency portal on the website that shows you all the numbers and stuff, to be able to drill down for more detail. And one of the things we hope to get out of that is the ability to go on there and say Civic Center project, and it'll just itemize out everything from budget to a year.
Definitely. And another thing regarding the budget, you have to remember, I mean, we were supposed to start this project last fiscal year.
Well, apparently
So-
based on the amount of money
Right.
left in 406. But
So, I mean, some of these, just like any capital projects, if we don't undertake them in a fiscal year that we're supposed to, usually what happens, they get rebudgeted into next fiscal year. And so the Civic Center, with the exception of the design component, you know, we always thought that, oh, we're gonna start construction in fiscal year 18-19, and, you know, that didn't happen. So we're kind of delayed, in some of those phases.
Can I say this? Go ahead.
Catherine, am I right in thinking that your being here today is not so much an audit, it's the planning for the audit that you're
Yes.
gonna be doing?
Yes.
Okay.
So just a quick question, and I probably should know the answer to this, but, if everything goes on schedule, when are you supposed to be moving into the new town center?
Yeah, you wanna ask me or you wanna ask George, because I have a different year.
Okay, George.
I'm hoping 2022.
2021. Don't ask me which one.
Sounds about right, sounds about right.
Oh, yeah, that's right, you guys have a raffle or something.
Yeah. It's supposed to be, the contractor date is in May of 2021.
Oh, you might get it done in
Supposed to
2021.
finish,
Okay,
Right, but I'm thinking more like October.
yeah, all
I got
right,
rain
thanks.
delays coming and that sort of stuff. Yeah, but of course.
And I'm gonna distract the contractor.
And if it's, 21-22, then we can allocate ERAF with the council's permission from that year back to the project.
Anything else for Catherine?
Thank you.
Thank you,
For
Catherine.
coming.
Yes, I'll see you in a few months, you're welcome.
How much time will you have to actually spend over here?
So usually we spend 1 week in interim, so in April, and then 1 week at October, and then we usually spend another week in the office.
Okay. Where are you gonna work now that there's no conference room for you?
We were going to
No,
go sit on at
What
his
did you
desk.
mean, your conference room?
Yeah.
Oh, where we're gonna have our closed session and other little.
Well, that'll probably be in the conference room next door, is where the closed session will be. But no,
Stick them over here.
we made sure that we had a conference room for them, so they'll be in there. So, but yeah. It's in here, it's
Oh, wait a second, we're not done, George is done, right?
I
No,
know.
we're getting to the three.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See you later.
Bye, Catherine.
Do we still have a quorum? I guess so.
Yeah, we do.
All right, we're moving on to the next section.
Oh, yeah.
So our only other item is meeting dates.
Pretty clear.
You generated our paper for that.
Oh,
I think it's, as usual, it's a little too early to say that there won't be conflicts on May 12th, 2020. But as far as proposed dates, I don't if there's any information to think that these proposed dates aren't a good starting template.
Yes, I'm sorry, so May 12th, there's a potential, is that what you said, May 12th?
No, he just says
No,
hard to know at
I
this
said,
point.
I should have said July, through July 14th. My
Yeah.
point is,
Right, I
I'm
agree.
not,
Yeah. Now, I do need to report that I cannot make the September meeting because I will be out of the country until the 14th of September.
One of the things, Robert, I would just suggest, and obviously I can accommodate, but like this week, the council back was 707 pages.
Oh,
No, I know,
And then to have a finance committee meeting that sometimes your packs have been over 100 pages.
Right.
And we get all the stuff thrown at us Friday night to read, and I have to have it ready for George and ready for this meeting here. It just seems that it's inappropriate to have the meetings on the same week that we have a council meeting.
Right.
That
And
makes
so
sense.
you might wanna look into that, that's just my, and you know, I realize at the end of my term, then I won't be on this committee again next year, but I just think that it really, to come prepared and have read everything, and to come prepared and having read everything, be prepared for the council meeting as well.
Right.
Having a meeting at the same time, you know, I got the same problem with the trash board, you know, on certain months I have, 400 or 500 pages for this and 405 pages for them, and there's one's Wednesday night and the other's Thursday afternoon. Right, so it's just a heck of a lot of reading.
No, and definitely, I agree, and the good thing about it is our council meetings are the third Wednesday of the month, and our, meetings are the second Tuesday of the month. So this week was just an anomaly, only because of the way, we could get, Catherine out here, and then the way the holiday fell,
Okay.
so that's why we had it today. But, yes, going forward, I'll make sure that if we do have to, schedule a meeting change from these dates, that they're, either not on the same week as the council meeting, just for that matter.
Makes sense.
so, Ann can't make September 10th, but I can't make the following week. I'll be out of the country, so.
Why don't you have it on the 24th?
I'm fine with it.
Sorry, we're talking about September now?
Yes. So you're gone that week.
We didn't get to Vika's comment
Right.
regarding availability before she left, but, could I suggest that we adopt this tentative schedule with the exception that you poll the committee to see which September date would make everybody happiest?
And so for the September, we're saying, for September, then just let them know that the 10th and 17th, that you won't be.
Well, I mean, Bill's saying we could go all the way to the 24th, and I guess we could go earlier too. We could go all
That's
the, you got Labor Day.
But then I'm kind of, speaking of that, we have a study session on the 1st, on the 4th, sorry. So.
Yeah, but study sessions are easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're good with either September 3rd or the 24th?
I'm not here with her either. I'm gone for like
Oh,
4 weeks,
okay.
sorry.
I'm good for the first half of September, but I leave the 14th, and I'm gone the rest of the month.
About the 12th.
But I'm just speaking for myself, and Ann's just
Right.
speaking for herself.
Right, exactly.
Just do a doodle or something like that with it.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple dates
Right.
for September.
That's what I'm
And
suggesting.
then, I'll pick the one that we get the quorum.
Right.
Yeah,
And go from there.
makes sense.
I'll come either time and I'll be prepared, but I just.
You'll send it to all of us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't be quiet.
No, we won't.
I stay, feel, paranoid
Okay.
about being the new guy.
Nobody else has anything? I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And welcome again.
It's been a.
Great to have you.
Lively
You know,
meeting.
I live in Linden.
That's a good
Do
question.
you? We're
George
corner
does.
of Magnolia and Irving, so we're at the north end. Where's
So
the
no doubt he's on top of it.
Oh,
I
okay, yeah,
kind of
okay.
feel like.
Well, we're talking about it.
From a public.
Yes, that's right.
Image
Sorry.
point of view, like, the almanac.
So it's.
We have a cat that may have ranged over to you.
Good.
Now, are you on the west corner or
Update
the
every 2 months or something.
east
With
corner?
west,
That's kind of what was
so
going on.
northwest corner, yeah.
That's a good idea.
Oh, gosh, since
Robert?
1992.
Yes, sir.
And
Yeah, so Bob was saying that maybe we could have like a finance reconciliation on where we are, where we expect to be
But we love
on the
the
civic center, and just have that as an item just to advise the finance committee.
back.
2 years ago.
I think that's a good
major
idea.
landscaping there.
Oh, yeah, I need to do that.
You talk to George about it, make sure there's not a whole lot of extra work for you.
Do I ask him or you for that? I forget what it's called.
The cost model manager,
Yeah.
I can send that. I'll get that from him.
What do you call it again?
The cost model manager?
Awesome.
How come you guys didn't come to the concerts in the park?
Robert came.
Yeah.
I've never heard bands before. Also, we have, we often have stuff in the evenings, like we have a choir rehearsal or something to go to on Monday, and I have work rehearsals on Wednesday.
All right,
so-
no problem.
They will attend?
I'd say they were, for Atherton, they were fair. I think, the first one was on the day of the Warriors playoff.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
So
I know why
attendance
I
was
wasn't-
low on that one.
Yeah.
However, the other ones, I guess we probably had double the number of people.
They're pretty good.
And then we have a movie, next Thursday, Incredibles 2, if you're interested in that. But
Yeah.
there'll be, a bouncy house and the library will have some sort of activity also, that starts around 5:30, 6 o'clock. The movie starts at 8.
So what is
Yeah.
the preferred way to enter and exit, over here?
Oh, I always go up and down.
Okay, all
It
right.
looks like they unlocked.
I came in,
it.
well,
I-
no,
I
Bob
unlocked
did, so let me in.
For walking across, Linden, from Linden Avenue to